Hello, everybody. Yeah, that was completely unintentional because I was testing some live streaming and having to set up all of the software and stuff like that. I was just basically getting it ready. It's been quite a few years since I last did a proper live stream. And then suddenly I see messages appearing on the side of the screen. So yeah, it was quite funny. It was like, oh, it works. But by the time I'd realised that it actually worked, I'd actually sort of just turned off and figured out that I'd actually managed to connect everything up and make it work. So I've been trying different devices this evening just to see if it would work correctly. And it was quite amusing to see that it actually did. But there seems to be a problem with the way that it's displaying on my main screen. So there was quite a lag, probably about a minute's worth of lag between when the test went up, or what I thought was the test, and me actually being able to see stuff on here. So that explains why you suddenly saw a live stream and then you suddenly didn't, because I didn't actually know that I was live, which is quite amusing. So yeah, I can start to see a few people in here asking a few questions, and I can see a couple of questions popping up and things like that. So I will, seeing as some of you have very loyally appeared and have asked a few questions and stuff, I thought maybe I would just go live anyway and have a little chat while we're here and see if there's a few questions that anybody wants to answer. So yeah, slightly accidental, I'm afraid, as are all the best things in life, or so my kids say. But yeah, if anybody's got a question that they want to ask, then feel free and ping a quick question over here, and I will endeavour to give you an answer. It seems to be taking it takes a bit of a lag, and I do have an alternative connection here that would probably be a little bit faster. But what I'm seeing on here, and probably what you're seeing, is a little bit different to what's either side of what we can see from here. But let's have a look. Somebody's asking a question here. I'm just going to tip this around slightly because I haven't really set this up appropriately. So I just need to make sure I've got a place where I can actually see everything on here. The first question was this a scheduled session? No, it wasn't. I was just testing stuff, as you could tell. But what I will do is I will do a proper session for you, given a bit of time. A couple of people saying here, are you going to do some masterclasses? Yes, you are. I'm actually sat in the boardroom at the moment, and we've just finished kitting this out with all of the appropriate furniture and stuff. So we will invite some people over. We'll probably do a couple of little test events before we do it properly. So yeah, you know, we'll put up a competition or something on Twitter and invite some people over just so that you can come and experience it, and we can make sure that everything works the way that they should do. And then we'll probably start running some more courses again. Somebody's asking here, for your football ratings, do you look at home form or only teams playing at home, or both? If you look at the way that I do football, it's very different from everything that you see out there. I generally don't look at stats. I'm trying to model and forecast what I think will happen in the game. And then I compare that to a game that is taking what happens during the game. So if you look, I sort of sometimes try and explain this, but I don't seem to do it very well in some of the videos. But I'm not working to a specific system. I'm basically trying to understand what goes on within the match, how that's going to influence things, and take positions from there. But I will model that before the match, and as the match gets underway, I will see if my assumptions are correct. From the person with the unpronounceable nickname, and thank you very much for all your comments that you make on the videos. Did you manage to get anything out of the Winks market? I did, but not much. Typically when something's that short, you tend to find it comes in a little bit more. So I didn't do much on it. I think it was about 40 or 50 quid. So yeah, I did get a little bit out of the Winks market, but not a great deal. How much money is needed to start trading? You could start with quite small amounts, but I started with about 1,000. But I suggest any time that you attempt trading, what you really need to do is get a bank, split it in half, and accept that you're going to lose half of it. And then by the time you've lost half of it, you've learned some valuable lessons, and you'll be able to progress a bit firmer from there. So yeah, whatever bank you've got, divide it in two, and be prepared to lose half of it. Online courses, are we going to do some more courses this year? There's loads planned. We've been busy because we're in the quieter period now. Relatively speaking, we can devote a bit more time to doing new educational stuff. So there's tons that we've produced. We uploaded the BetAngel Trader course this week, which is about 3 hours worth of tuition, but that's just on the product. There's no additional stuff available within there in terms of trading strategies, but that was an important thing that we needed to do, and we've uploaded that this week, but there's plenty more to follow from there. Several people, James has said, do you do a meetup of any sort? I haven't done little things, but it's generally based around trade shows or events that are organised by the exchanges, and I think it's a good idea. We probably should do some, and I think that if we did that, it would be quite interesting for people to get together and share information. But also, I think you get a different impression of people when you meet them. One of the things, this is why we're gonna do a few more events here, because the issue that I had, well, I say it wasn't an issue, had an office just up the road previously here, but I always ended up getting into arguments with the landlords about how much it cost and all sorts of other things, and I was there at all odd hours, and it was getting a complete pain. So I knew I wanted to get rid of the office at some point and move into our own place, and that's what we've done. It gives us a bit more flexibility in terms of what we want to do and how we want to do it. But also, if we invite people here just for sort of casual events, then things will work out. But it is quite small. It's not as big as a formal office. But the intention was that we didn't want to burden ourselves with that sort of overhead, really. So I imagine we'll probably be doing a few different events as we go through the year. And typically I can only really sort of do them early in the week because I'm pretty quiet in the early part of the week, and towards the end of the week it just gets too busy to really spend much time doing anything else. There's lots of questions, actually, probably more questions than I'll reasonably be able to answer, and my wife will go mad when she realises that I'm talking to you, because I just said I was going to nip upstairs for 5 minutes, because I'm officially supposed to not be doing anything now, just chilling basically after a busy week, and also I was working overnight, so I was up at, I can't even remember what time it was, 3 a.m. or something. So I'm just going to tweak this and see if I can actually get this box a little bit bigger. Oh, here we go, pop out chat. So yeah, this may be a little bit weird while I'm finding my way around, but the intention of testing this tonight quickly was to just make sure that I could get the technology working. Seems a bit slow to me. It's probably because I'm streaming. Let's bring that down and over here. Yeah, that worked well. Yeah, I think it was better not to do the pop-out chat, I think. There were quite a large number of questions, actually, that I hadn't anticipated. But I'm just going to scroll through these for a second, just see what questions we've got that I can answer in a reasonable amount of time. Daffy says, I've been scalping for 18 months, improving a little. Is it nearly time to give up? Absolutely not, because you're about to come into the best period of the year for doing that. The only thing I'd say about scalping is it isn't suitable in all markets, so you need to be aware that you really need to be choosy about which markets you want to attempt to scalp, because Not all of them are particularly suitable. But when we get to Cheltenham and you get a big competitive handicap, you'll find those markets are perfect for that sort of activity. So don't give up now. At least give yourself a shot until after the Aintree Grand National meeting, when you would have had Cheltenham and some very competitive handicaps at Aintree to be able to do that. Phil says, or Philip, I don't know, should I call you Philip or Phil? Says, who's backing Saints for relegation? That's the only reason that I mentioned your name. So, yeah. They were unlucky against Cardiff, but obviously their form is concerning. Mark says, how much bankroll do you usually trade with on a daily basis? It varies dramatically. I think today, I mean, if you look at the market with Winks, that was at 450 this morning, that was trading at 109, 110, and that was an incredibly short price. So I had to use a lot of money just to get anything reasonable out of that particular market. So I think there was at one point 140,000 sat on one side of the book, and I think I stuck in a trade for about 15, 20,000. But if you look at what I would do on a daily basis, I'm trying to think. I don't know off the top of my head without looking at the stats, which I haven't collected, on what would be the largest amount of money that I used today, but it would have been many tens of thousands. But I do tend to keep more money in my account at this time of the year because we're coming up to Cheltenham, so I want to have a large amount of money at Cheltenham. The most I've ever traded in one race is well over 500,000, and that would have been at somewhere like Cheltenham. Darren says, what impact do you think new regulations on FOBT will have on the bookmaker industry? Well, I think it will squeeze margins, and they'll look to make up that margin somewhere else. So, yeah, you've got the possibility that that could impact us indirectly. James says, do you think for learning how to read charts? Probably a bit more in time. I have got a bit. There are probably about 5 or 6 charting videos, but they're mainly around designing charts rather than interpreting them. But I think that could probably be an hour on its own, in all honesty. How do you remain disciplined while trading? This is John Johns. How do you remain disciplined while trading when going red? When do you know that you'll always have enough money to replace your bank? I think it's probably slightly different for me because I'm always confident that I will be up at the end of the day, even if I go through a rough spell. But you tend to find, especially on racing, when you start, you often get a sort of a bit of a wobbly start, and then you sort of build into some of the feature races, and then it sort of tails off a bit towards the end of the day. So if you haven't done well by the middle of the afternoon, then you're probably not going to do well on the day. But as a consequence, you learn to flex in and out of the markets. I'm usually a little bit more cautious when things start. Then I build up a head of steam and a lot of speed and really go for it as we move through the afternoon, and then I start to relax a bit towards the end of the afternoon. But I would say maintaining discipline over a day, a week, a month, or a year isn't too difficult. But because the more markets you do, as long as you have an expectancy positive strategy, the more likely you are to end up overall. So as a consequence, it helps if you know that and you do it frequently enough, because then you'll be fine and your confidence will flow naturally anyway. The most difficult thing that you have, and like it happened to me once today, where I thought I knew what the market was going to do. It went spiraling against me quite quickly, but having seen this many times before, I just held my nerve. So I think that experience is a good way of being able to make sure that you retain control of exactly what you're doing. And that comes with experience, really. But I generally don't panic. I'll get frustrated and annoyed, but I generally don't panic when a trade starts to go wrong. Matthew says, what was your best trade? Can you talk us through it? I did make an offer on Twitter earlier on some of the races that I documented at the beginning of the session that I would do a video on it next week. You don't seem to talk much about in-running racing. No, the funny thing is I can actually read a race really, really well because I've watched so many of them. I get a real deep understanding of the way that a race is being run. but I sort of did that by accident. So I can do it. It's just that, especially when there are small gaps between races, I don't have the time to do it. I do have an in-running bot that I deploy, but of course you can't really talk about that because it just does what it does and there's not much to say about it. But if you wanted me to talk you through or talk about race reading, once you begin to do it, you become quite natural at beginning to identify horses that are likely to end up winning a race. And some of the clues are quite simple. But if you listen to the commentators are generally very good at race reading and will give you a massive hint. And if you listen to them frequently enough during a race, you'll begin to understand how to read a race. But I'm happy to do a video on that if you want. LV says, I'm still not understanding your response around football trading. I heard you mention the Dixon's Cole model previously. Yeah, it's funny actually in football, because when you look at the way that people interpret football, not many people try and model the matches frequently enough. And I think that that's the key, because really, if you look at all football trading in any market, what you're trying to say is there going to be a goal or isn't there going to be a goal? And if there is or isn't, when is that goal going to occur? So that's essentially what you're trying to look at. The Dixon's Cole stuff is very old now, so a lot of the models that I see and have worked with in recent years are very well removed from a Dixon's Cole's model. But it is worth understanding or looking at a variety of different methods of modelling. But essentially what you're trying to do in a football match, and this is what it boils down to in essence, is when are the goals going to be scored and over what time period. I think it's a spelling mistake here. It says, have you considered doing a live pooping chat? That is not something that I have considered. Very interesting comment there. Can you do Bet Angel on a mobile? You can, but only via a VPS. Very unusual questions coming through here from Dickie Mo. I think that's a bit of a wind-up. Let's scroll some of these questions back here a little bit. What are the easiest and most difficult sports to trade on? I like racing, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it's the easiest. The reason that I like racing is simply because it's driven purely by opinion. There's nothing else that is necessarily required to think about there. Okay, there are a few things, but because it's driven by opinion, I think that that's the purest type of market. If you look at tennis or football, you're waiting or reliant upon an outcome at some point. So necessarily, those are much harder because they're not subjective, and you need to preempt things that you can't possibly particularly understand at some point in time. But because of the high variability in things like football and tennis and cricket, they tend to produce quite large payoffs, and therefore are very appealing to people. But of course the large payoff can flip the other way as well. What do you suggest learning to help with automation? Automation and automating trading is essentially a problem-solving thing. So I suggest, rather than learning anything in particular, you work on problem-solving skills, trying to identify situations that could occur and trying to solve the problems that surround them. What key information is important to log? And I can't quite read the bottom of that, got to scroll down. And it's flowing straight off the top, so that's a little bit annoying. It seems to be very chunky, the chat window. I'm going to have to work on that, so apologies if I've just missed that question clean off. I apologise for that. Do you ever have days where you lose money overall throughout the day? Inevitably you will at some point, although it's deceptive for me because I've been doing this for so long. It's very, well, I say very rare, It's not impossible, but it's unlikely that I will have a losing day, simply because if you have an edge and you do loads and loads and loads and loads of markets in one particular day, then the chance of you ending up is actually quite high. But if you just do one market a day, then the chance of you ending up or down, is sort of not 50-50, but it's going to be much, much higher. However, if you've got a tiny edge and you replicate it many, many, many times over the course of the day, then the chance of you ending up down on the day is actually quite low. So if you've got a definable edge, then you replicate and repeat it as many times as you can. So yeah, I do have down days. I'm trying to think when the last down day was, and it would have probably been early in the week at some point when I was just doing a small number of markets and messing around. But typically I try my hardest not to lose on a day, and if the day is relatively weak, then I just do less markets and things that I'm more certain of. So yeah, I manage it that way. This is a common question we get actually answered, which is John saying, can you add a live video window with Inside BetAngel? One of the reasons we can, it's certainly possible to do that. I'm just going to scroll back up here because the number of questions are running right off the bottom here. So if one of the reasons we don't put the live video window directly into the application is that we've tested this and we've looked at the impact that doing that has on the underlying application, not just on our product, on other products. And we realize, especially when you're using things like automation, that you run into problems of the live video stressing the underlying system. So we prefer that you spawn it on a browser that is custom made to stream video and not within the app itself. So we are looking at a number of different ways of doing that, but that's typically the way that we recommend doing it. So I know that some people just want to press a button and to bring it up on a window inside the app, but we figured out that that has performance issues and problems it creates within the app itself. So it's better that you do it independently, and that's what I do. I'll run a separate screen if I don't have access to TV pictures and run it that way. It's just a much more sensible way of doing it. Rare Cockney Governor says, what does dip in and out mean? I'm not sure in what context you mean there. You may be saying dip in and out of a market or a day. If you can clarify that, I'll answer that question for you. I think you may have asked that somewhere before as well. Let's have a quick look. What's the strangest thing you've ever seen in trading? That's a really good question. I've seen lots of bizarre things, but it depends upon the context in which you want to measure it, because I've seen people do strange things. I've seen people go to extraordinary lengths to try and make money from a trading market, and I've seen really bizarre and strange things happen within a trading market. Every now and again, the market freaks out and you're left with this situation where you're thinking, well, this can't be real because this is just such a great opportunity that it doesn't make any sense. So I can't believe that this opportunity is in front of me. And the first few times something like that happens, you very often just ignore it because you're dumbstruck with what is in front of you. But over time, you begin to learn to jump on those opportunities. So yeah, I guess it depends upon what you're looking to say when you ask that question. But there are many weird and strange things I've seen right across the industry, from front to back, from top to bottom. Let's have a look. Somebody's saying, let's have a look down here. There's quite a few questions actually, probably more than I can answer. Let's have a look. Quite a few questions about the next training class. If you sign up to the academy, the mailing list, we will email you very shortly. And like I said, we will get people in here fairly shortly so that you can test everything, like the coffee machine and all of the facilities. It should be a pleasant surprise for you when you come here, because I haven't talked at all about what we've done here. And I think the first few people here will be surprised by what they find. Somebody said here, do you recommend a lay to back horse racing as a viable strategy? Every strategy is viable as long as you put it in the right market. The thing I would say with back to lay and lay to back strategies is effectively what you're looking for is a winner, or a loser, or a race. So if you focus on becoming a good pricer of a market and get a good understanding of the way that a race will be run, then that will put you into a much better position than any variation on that strategy itself. So when I was looking at dobbing and various other strategies, it turned out that the more and more I pursued it, the more and more I ended up in a situation where I was just trying to find out who was going to win the race, basically, or be in contention. And of course, it varies dramatically by race distance. So if you're over 5 furlongs, you're going to have a very different profile to the way a trade would play out than if you're over 4.5 miles. Those two races are going to be run completely differently and have totally different characteristics. Alex says, is there a different approach to trading a race if you have 1, 2 favourites or 3 favourites, or is it... not sure I completely understand that question. Let me reread it. Is there a different approach to trading a race if you have 1 favourite, 2 favourites? Because you can only have 1 favourite. I think what you're talking about is a short price is probably what you're talking about, or something that's nearly a joint favourite. So yeah, you would vary it quite dramatically between different race types. So if there's a clear favourite, it's very different from having a race that has 2 horses that are priced very similar. And that's radically different from a race that would have 3 priced very similar. In fact, I hate small fields and evenly priced, short-priced favourites, because they're probably the hardest type of race to read. What type of trading do you do on the horses? There is no typical trade. Every market is slightly different. I would generally categorise it into doing a very short in and out trade to something that's much longer term. So you would tend to look at a market and decide which one of those ways you're going to go is typically what you're trying to do. But I always talk about framing a trade. When you turn up at a market, you're saying this is where it's traded, that's where it is at the moment, and this is where I think it's going, and that's where it's going to stop. So you tend to frame your trade in that manner. So sometimes that range will be quite large, sometimes it'll be quite small. So you vary your trade according to where you think that's going to be. Ray Cockney Governor has said the market example, a horse race, you dip in and out. So I think what you're trying to say here is you go in and out of the market. So usually when I say dip in and out, what I'm talking about is I go into a market, I attempt to trade a market, but I'll go into it for a short period of time, and then I'll close the trade and then drop out again and then reassess things. So typically I'm going to be looking for a move of some sort, and when that move is complete, I'll just stop unless if I can see a valid reason for going back in and trying it again. John says, is the running automation through Excel slower than Guardian? Yes. The automation within inside Guardian is much, much faster because it can refresh at 20 milliseconds, and it's quite lightweight. In Excel, you have to go through another layer effectively. But obviously, you've got more flexibility in Excel, so you swings and roundabouts there. But we've enhanced consistently the amount of automation that you can do in Guardian, and there's another enhancement coming up after Cheltenham. And with the intention of trying to replicate everything that everybody needs to do. So if you've got a suggestion that you want something to go into automation, it's worth putting up on the forum, because we do read them all. We may not comment on all of them because we don't want to set false expectations. And sometimes it's difficult for us to do all of them, even though they look quite simple. We have to line them up so it all goes in line with everything else that we're trying to do. There's a good question here which says, is the bulk of your tennis and soccer/football trading strategies in play? Typically they are. Tennis pre-off accounts for a negligible amounts, less than 5% of total volume. 90-95% of it is in play. Football stroke soccer is a bit different because you can trade that quite actively pre-off. I can't remember the number off the top of my head now. It's probably 25.75 pre-off and in play, somewhere around that level. So it is perfectly possible to do it. And the person asking that's from Australia, where they can't do that, and you have my sympathies because I know that is a big problem for you. Somebody's asked here, do you ever trade basketball? Funny enough, I have. If I'm over in the US, I've taken a real interest in how the odds move on basketball in the US because I wanted to understand if there was somebody in that time zone trading it. Because if you go to the US, or North America, I should say, then Betfair is legal in Mexico, and you can see that there's a lot of activity on NBA, NFL, and NHL and stuff like that. So you can tell that there are people actively trading out there. So I have looked at it, but not traded it seriously. I have messed around a bit. There's somebody on the forum that's been posting up a variety of bits on basketball, and I have modelled basketball actually, but I haven't really done anything seriously on it because of the time difference. But I imagine somebody in a different time zone would be able to do quite well at that. Do I trade US horse racing? Bits. I have done it, and you can do it, but the liquidity is low and the start times are pretty random, so I generally don't put much focus on it. The Kentucky Derby, stroke Derby, isn't listed on Betfair any longer, but typically at least once a year I will do the Breeders' Cup, so I can trade it, and I have traded it profitably, but it's not a major focus of mine. Going to scroll down and get some more questions. I'm going to have to fix this pop-up window when I do the next live stream because it's so slow. If you wanted to make £1 per race while learning, which strategy would you use? Scalping's the easiest one to understand, but most people get it quite wrong because people cut out for losses too frequently, and the market nowadays is very jiggly. It does this all of the time. It's very annoying, and you have to overcome that sense of panic when the market does that. But if you put an order in the market, wait for it to fill, and then decide if it's safe to put another one in the market, that's quite a nice way to learn how to trade initially. But yeah, don't get too hung up on one strategy or another. What race do you find the easiest to read? Competitive handicaps and very short-priced favourites. They make money on those till the cows come home. What do you think the impact of US liquidity have on Betfair? None, based upon what I saw when I went over there in October. Most of the legislation I saw being filed was for sports books and nothing to do with exchanges. So unfortunately, I don't think immediately there's going to be any real change there. Which is strike rate on the horses? I have said this quite a few times before. Generally, depending upon the quality of the market and how well I'm trading, somewhere about 70 to 80% of races I will win on. And if you look on a day like today, my average wins were pretty large. I try and contain losses as much as possible, but part of that is by getting into a good position and managing it well. There's a good question here saying, I think I'm trying to run before I walk. Am I better off getting adept at one type of strategy and then moving on to another? And my simple answer to that is yes. Focus on one thing, master it, and then move on. That's exactly how I started. I started with one strategy, figured out the markets that it didn't work very well in, and then started adapting it and using other strategies to fill in those gaps in those markets, and then gradually worked myself to the place where I can just do whatever market I like, and I know what strategy will apply to it. I like this question here. Do you think financial technical analysis such as candlesticks, moving averages, MACD and support resistance, there are some things that work well and other things that don't work so well. So the timescales are so compressed, it's sort of like trading a foreign exchange or an option market. It's like trading foreign exchange on steroids or an option market just before expiry. So if you're used to trading those types of markets and you've got indicators that you feel comfortable within those, then you could probably replicate it. But quite often, some of the stuff that you see in financial markets doesn't quite translate, because in a sports market, everything's a closed loop effectively. Something goes up here, something's got to go down there, whereas in a financial market, everything can rise and fall at the same time, even though it's not logical. How would I automate a betting strategy based on price change before post time in horse racing? I'm not sure I totally understand that question. The automation, I should make the point here, is 95% of automation comes after you've created the strategy. I know that sounds weird, but you come up with a concept and then you test, bug, debug, refine it, put it into the market, bring it out, edit it, redo it again, make sure it works properly, and then the strategy then deploys and runs on its own. So 95% of the work on automation will be in that period, but obviously once you've got a bit of automation that works, then you can just let it loose and it will run permanently for you, and that's the greatest feeling in the world. But you'll have to go in and tweak it now and again, but it's always front loaded. All of the work that you do on it is front loaded, and the design of the strategy is relatively straightforward, but then making it work exactly the way that you want it and adding a few variations in and debugging it takes a fair amount of time. But once you've gone through that pain, then you'll get paid back 100-fold over on automation. Will you take a position now in the Champions League winners market? I probably, it's generally on the outright. If you look at cup competitions, you get a tier of seeds. When you get seeded competitions, you tend to find it harder to do really interesting trades, because they tend to focus on getting all of the top seeds towards the end of the tournament. So, it's a little bit harder in some of those markets where things are seeded. I prefer markets where the participants are completely random in terms of progression. There's a question here about Bitcoin crypto sites. I don't use any of those, and I'm not aware of any that I could recommend. I'll be completely honest with you. My wife says you have a calming voice. Well, maybe you'd like me to record some calming words for you just before you go to bed. Thank you for that. What is the weirdest sport you've ever traded? There's so many weird sports I've traded, but typically when I do the Olympics, sometimes I get involved in some very, very strange markets at the Olympics. I've had some fantastic payoffs at the Olympics, but generally on low volume. So it's not something that is going to change the world, but they've been some very odd, strange sports that I've actively traded on the Olympics. So I think they'd probably classify in that. Sometimes political markets and stuff like that can be a bit odd. But generally where there's liquidity, there's usually an opportunity. So I'll blunder into those markets, and especially where there's lack of information, special markets, all of these celebrity TV shows and stuff, I'll often get involved in as well. So typically you'll find opportunities popping out all over the place, but I don't actively search for them. Somebody says something to me, I read a newspaper article or something, and then suddenly an idea clicks and I know what to do, and I just go into the market and start working on it from there. Can I do cricket trading and bet anywhere? Yep, you can trade everything you want. And Darren says, I think snooker would be a good market, but liquidity is surprisingly low. And yeah, I agree. Anything that's two people where the competition is going to be relatively close, you would think are perfect trading markets. And I haven't checked out snooker for some time. It's been a long time since I've looked at that. But I have been interested in darts for a while because the liquidity on darts is growing. Do you model horse racing to estimate Betfair starting prices? I don't, but I can. So I have modelled horse racing because I got interested in how the handicapper works, because I wanted to see basically what I think the true price is. This is always a criticism I'll have for pundits and tipsters, is that they don't, what they should be doing is giving you prices that they're willing to back or lay at, or what they think the true price is within a market, and you very rarely see that. I would love a service that would allow us to do that. Are there bigger fish in the horse racing markets than you? It's a funny question because I want to go no, but I obviously can't know every single participant in the market, but I do know a lot of them, and I know a lot of the data that sits behind it within the market. So I don't believe there are many people that are probably as big as I am within the market. The problem that I have nowadays is trying to get as much money through as I can without influencing the price. So that's the battle that I have to face on a daily basis. How long did you trade via the Betfair interface before switching to software-based trading? About two years. I used the Betfair websites before switching to some sort of trading aid. Apparently, Simona Halep lost at 102 today. No, I didn't trade that, unfortunately. I'm hoping that you did. Somebody's putting here, what's your favourite tennis trade? I love it on tennis when a player looks like he's about to win, because typically I'm looking at that point for if a player is sort of just drops his shoulders a bit and gets a bit more relaxed and tries a couple of crazy shots, because it's amazing in tennis how fast that can turn around. So when players look as though they've almost definitely won, I'll very often shovel a bit of money back in at very short odds if I detect that they're getting a little bit slack in terms of closing out the match. There's an interesting question here. It says professional traders must have strategies to reduce or reverse traded losses. You'll be surprised actually that I wouldn't do that. My judgment on when I get involved in the market is trying to minimize the amount of loss that I've got through my entry, not through doing something crazy to try and reduce the losses. So I don't play that sort of game really at all. I know some people try and reduce losses by trading out of them one way or another, but it's not something that I play. Desert Orchid has said, this message is now in play. I should have said that, and I will. On the next live chat, I'm going to start with those words, because hopefully the next one will be planned rather than unplanned. Why did you choose sports trading over financial markets? Well, it's funny actually, because when I originally looked at doing trading of any sort, I thought I was going to leave my job and do financial markets. So I'd already done quite a bit of trading and I'd done some investing. But one of the things that changed my mind was when I picked up the book about Warren Buffett, I realised that actually probably what I'd be good at would be longer term investing. But the problem you've got with that is you need money to invest it, to make the money to be able to invest longer term. So it was a bit of a catch-22. And I did try trading financial markets short term to start with, but I was hopeless at it. I was really rubbish at it. But the sports trading sort of fitted in nicely with my philosophy of doing longer term investment. So trading on sports and then investing the money sort of worked pretty well. But because of my ability and my knowledge has grown significantly trading short term on sports, I've been able to start picking off a few opportunities short term on financials. But predominantly, I find sports trading relatively straightforward and easy to encapsulate. And then the money I'll invest typically, although I'm not adverse to taking shorter term positions now. So yeah, I'll try and do all if I can. What's the future for trading in the next 10 years? If you ever Google, let's see if I get this correct, the Gittins index, because the Gittins index sort of gives you a good guesstimate as to how long something will go. So read up on that, but basically, to really paraphrase it quickly, it basically says if something's been going for a long time now, it probably will continue for a long time in the future. So I think exchange and sports betting and trading is going to be around for a long period of time now. It's impossible to put it back in the box, as it were. But I think it will change, because the question here as well is, will automation take over? I think automation and automating some element of what you're doing is a natural progression of the trading. Because when I started, I was completely manual and using the Betfair website, but obviously I'm a lot more advanced now. So I think it's inevitable that it will push a bit more in that direction, I think. Esports, somebody asked about here. Yeah, I've kept watching brief on esports. A good friend of mine is involved in that industry. He's quite senior within the gaming industry. So I've been leaning on him for a bit of advice and knowledge in terms of what's happening with esports, but it does seem to be growing, and it seems that that will become a little bit more dominant, and you will probably find people gambling on it almost certainly. Any plans on making cricket traded for BetAngel? I've I've done a lot of work on cricket in the background actually, just out of sort of interest really, because I don't really have time to trade cricket properly. But I did become quite fascinated with T20 and the way that T20 matches play out. So you can't rule anything out ever. And Daniel has hit the nail right on the head here. He's put, since horse racing markets are more volatile now than a few years ago, do you think the closing odds are still efficient? And the very short answer is no, I don't. I think that the market is tighter in terms of book percentage than ever, but I think that the markets are not anywhere near as efficient as they used to be. The volatility and the range in which prices trade is way out of what you should expect, because if the market's accurately discounting information, you would not see some of the moves that you see now. So there's a whiff of panic in a lot of markets. Therefore, I think that the prices are more out of kilter now than they've ever been. The closing price is probably reasonably efficient. I did actually measure when I went to Leopardstown to do a talk recently. Somebody asked me a similar question, and I gave a very specific answer to that. I'll speak to the guys and see if I can release a clip of that so that you can get a direct answer. I have asked them for some clips already, but we're still waiting for a response on that. Somebody says, are you an actuarial scientist? In a different life, probably. Is it possible to trade pre-match football more than 1 hour before the start of the match? I tend to get involved about 2 hours out, but obviously that period around when the team sheet is announced is critical, and that's when the liquidity floods in. It's the same in every sport. When information becomes accurate and available, the market liquidity will grow significantly. And if you want to make money, you have to think about how can you preempt that? How can you be ahead of other people in terms of anticipating what's likely to happen? And part of that will be acting on something really quickly when new information becomes available. How far away from the start of the race can you predict a move in odds on the horse? Well, you can. When you turn up in the morning, you can actually tell the likely range of where the horse will trade. So it is possible to do that. You can predict how much money is going to be traded in the market, where that money will go, and likely what influence that will have on price. The only problem that you've got is the further away you are, the bigger the range of uncertainty. So as you get closer and closer to the start of the race, you can get more and more certain, and as a consequence, liquidity rises. Almost ties in with the prior question, actually. So you can get a general feel for what could happen, but it's only as you get nearer and nearer to the race and more information becomes available will you actually be able to work out exactly where the price is likely to go. Somebody's asking if there is a way to bet from the US, and it's heavily restricted. We're not even allowed to develop software over there for the exchange in the US. You have to be a New Jersey resident in New Jersey and a verifiable New Jersey address to be able to use the exchange. So any chance of trying to do something clever there is not possible. I'm conscious of time here because I am going to be in trouble for doing this. So what I will do, and I promise I will do this, is hopefully I'll get a copy of the questions that are coming in, and I'll be able to answer a few more of those. But we'll do another live session at some point. Somebody's asked about pattern form here for dobbing, and I must admit I don't have any particular experience of that, so I can't confirm whether that's true or not. Somebody asking, can you rank variables in order of importance? It's sort of. The problem you have with racing is there's so much that interacts, is that sometimes it's difficult to capture all of those variables in one neat form. But there are certain things that determine the outcome, or the way that a race is likely to play out, either pre-off or in play. So and there are certain repeating patterns as well. So, a handicap, a very competitive handicap, tends to exhibit the same characteristics again and again, because the concept of a handicap is that, and a very competitive one, is that nobody really knows who's going to win the race. So you would expect those patterns to continually repeat. So, you can begin to put all of those variables together to identify characteristics that occur within a race. Somebody saying, can you use automation with a small bank? Would it be effective? I think probably that's where you want to start. All of the automation that I've ever started with started on absolutely tiny stakes and then gradually built upwards from there. So, I would actually recommend you start with something small, especially when you're in the early stages, because one of the problems you have with automation is every now and again it does something unusual and you're thinking, well, why did it do that? So using a small stake to start with and a small bank is generally a sensible way to go. So there was a strategy I started with on minimum stakes £2. I'm trying to remember when it was, 2011. And over the years it just gradually went up and up and up and up and up and up, and now it's on very, very large stakes. But it still sits there churning away, doing stuff for me in the background. I think you have to start somewhere, and especially when you're in that early stage of testing something and you may not have captured all of the possible outcomes, it's worth using small stakes, but there shouldn't be a barrier to moving up to bigger ones. And a good question here, how many days do you work averaged out over a month? Enormous amounts. If you look at today, I went to bed last night at about 11:30ish, and then it must have been about 3:30 I got back up again, so I didn't get that much sleep. But as we get towards the weekend, I get busier and busier because that's where all the opportunity is. But then on a Monday or a Tuesday, I revert to a more normal schedule and probably take a bit of time off. And sometimes I'm quite lazy, really. But I will spend the time looking at spreadsheets and messing around with data and doing stuff like that. But it's like running a business, really, which is unfortunate because I also have to run the Bet Angel business. So it's like running two businesses. And that puts a lot of time pressure on it. But thankfully, this is all my family have ever known. And they sort of know what the deal is. And also, I've been very keen to build up an environment around me here that allows me to do all of that and, mix in all of the other things that I need and want to do as well. So I feel quite lucky from that perspective. And also, the last job that I had, I was doing exactly the same thing. I'd be working on major projects that would have my attention continuously, and even when I came home at weekends, the phone would still be ringing because somebody somewhere had a problem or there was a factory somewhere that needed an answer on something. So it doesn't feel that much different from me. So it's the only life I've ever really known, to be honest. But I will say that I do enjoy it. I wouldn't do a job if I didn't enjoy it. So it's a pleasure for me to mess around with a spreadsheet and look at something and get a little bit inspired by something that I've discovered there. Somebody said, what are you doing on Saturday night? Well, it was completely unintentional, to be honest. And usually, Saturday evenings, when the last race finishes in the afternoon, that's it. And in fact, you can see I've got a beer here. So I had actually started having a few beers, and I'll usually have a game of FIFA or something and just totally chillax. So one of the things I wanted to try and do was test the live streaming and how I would do live streaming. And then by accident, I went live. So I thought I may as well do one. So completely unintentional. And I'll have to decide when would be the best time to do a live stream. I did ask that question on the community a little while ago, actually. Another question here. Actually, there's two good little questions. And these will have to be the last ones because I really must go and watch a movie or something and have another beer and do those things. But It says, does automation need constant adjusting? Does automation need constant adjusting? And I would say yes, it does. It needs constant tweaking. I'm constantly fiddling with it all of the time. Sometimes you fiddle too far. So you start with something and you modify and modify and modify, and then it stops working, and then you have to start rewinding it to the point where it stopped working or wasn't so effective. So I date every single file that I ever modify. So I'll start with a base file, and then I'll modify something, but the previous file gets archived and dated so that I can actually wind it backwards and forwards. And if the new version of it turns out to be not very effective, then I'll just rewind it and start from another point, because you'll learn on those things as you go along. But I'm a constant fiddler. I was doing it today when I was trading. I was modifying some automation in the background because I felt I could make it just a little bit better. And one of the questions on here says, do you ever use your bank to get out of trouble? Never, 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 never. I take the view that I make a decision and it's either right or wrong, and I'll take the medicine there if I get it wrong. And hopefully I'll get it right more than I get it wrong, and that's where the profit comes from. I never attempt to try and dig myself out of a hole, never. What I will do is probably round it off here, because it's been an hour actually, and my intention wasn't to do this at all. And I want to get another beer in before I head up to watch a movie with my wife or something. So I'll end it here, but I will do another one. And the intention of setting up the equipment in the room was to actually just test it and make sure that I did have something that would work. So I'm going to have a look at the video afterwards as well, and I'll probably publish it at some point, maybe tomorrow. And I will do a proper formal session, and I may tidy up the room a bit before I do it and get myself a little bit better organised. But thank you for popping in, because I didn't publicise this, and we've had a lot of people coming in here and asking questions. So thank you for taking your time out this evening to come in and ask a few questions as well. So I'm going to sign off here and say goodbye, but hopefully, because I'm getting some good feedback here, I think it's probably time that I did another one of these as well, and hopefully I can answer a few more questions for you. Anyway, take care, have a good one. Got to figure out how to turn it off now. I'm sure it'll be around here somewhere. I'll edit this bit out when it goes live. Here we go.